So now that we have a character or an enemy that can follow us around and attack us, we will have to add some damage animations, because there's not much fun about taking damage and dying without a damage animation and a death animation. So we need to create the death and the damage animation for both characters. So go to sprites and find your enemy, and then find the one called death. As you can see here, we have a death animation where the enemy is basically she's not moving or anything on damage 0 and 1. So I'm going to use these two to make a damage animation. So I'm going to select these two and move her into the scene and call it enemy damage. And I'm simply going to place this inside my animations folder under my enemy. So there we have my enemy damage animation. The next thing I'm going to do is to create the death animation. So I'm going to find the sprites again, called damage, and select all of them. Then I'm going to drag them in and call this one enemy death. And save. And then I'm going to do the same with the player. Let's go to our character and find our dead animation. And here I don't have two here. So basically, the easiest way to do this so that it doesn't move, to make a dead animation or damage animation, is to open it by right clicking, show in File Explorer, and then simply find the damage animation or the dead and copy this one and paste it, and you can rename it to maybe I should show it on screen. So what I just did was that I took the dead animation here and I copied it and pasted it, so I have a dead copy, and I rename it to take damage 1, and of course not copy. Now it's off screen again, but basically just take it and copy it and rename it to take damage 1. And when you've done that, here we have it. We can copy it and paste it again and call the new one, then copy take damage 2, just like this. So now I have take damage 1 and take damage 2, which are made from the damage animation 1 or the dead animation 1. So now that I have these, I can jump back into the game and I can find that one's called damage, under D of course. There we go, take damage. Let's see if I can find it on the T, because it's take damage, not does damage. Here we go. So we select these two because they are identical. So I can make an animation out of them. So drag them into the game and go to the player's animation and call it damage. And then we have to take the dead animation. Let's see if we can find it here. There we go. Select all the sprites and drag them into your scene and call it death. There we go. So now we have a death animation and a damage animation. So if you go to the animations, you'll see the new controllers. You'll have to delete the new controllers also from the player. But now we have two new animations. So go to the player and go to the animator, and then we'll have to drag in the death animation, and then we'll have to drag in the the damage animation as well. Damage, that was. And these two needs to be set up with the any state. Damage needs to be up here and death down here. So from any state, because we will need to be able to take damage in any state no matter what we're doing. If we're running, we should take damage. If we are attacking, we should be able to take damage, and so on. So we need to make a transition from any state to damage and from any state to death, because we also want to be able to die in any state. We shouldn't be immortal just because we're jumping or something. So we need to set up some parameters. So click on the plus and make a new trigger called die. click on the plus again and make a new trigger called death. Die and death, that's the same. So we should rename one of them to damage. There we go. So the death should be set to the death one. So die, click on death transition, click on the little plus and select the die as condition and remove everything here from it so that it transitions right away. Select the any state, the transition from any state to damage, and remove all the transition times and set up a parameter and select the damage parameter. There we go. So now we have the damage parameter set up. So now we should also be able to go from damage to idle state. So select the idle state and just select state machine idle state. And this one can have the exit time and everything. So when we're done taking damage, it just goes back into idle or running or whatever we're doing. So now the player can take damage, but we'll have to go to the enemy and do the exact same thing. So find the enemy damage and enemy death. Do the same things, make a transition to both of them, make a transition from damage to the idle, and set up the two parameters, which is die and damage. When we have set them up, we can select the transition between them and remove every single time, and click the plus and select death, die here, and between any state and enemy damage we can select damage. There we go, and keep the transition time and everything for our idle state. So now that we have the transitions and animations in place, we can add the functionality for dealing some damage. If we look at the prefab, we'll see we have one knife here, and basically we need two different knives. We need a knife for the player and a knife from the enemy. So we can duplicate the knife by pressing Ctrl D and renaming this knife to enemy knife. Okay, so now we have an enemy knife and a normal knife. So if we click on the enemy, we'll have to take the knife prefab on the enemy and replace it with the enemy knife instead, so that she uses the enemy knife instead of the normal knife. We also need to add a tag to the knife. So click on the enemy knife and go to the tag, add a new tag, and add a tag called enemy knife. And do the same for the prefab from the normal knife. So click on the knife, add tag, and add a new tag called knife as well. There we go. I forgot to set them. So click prefab, enemy knife, select the enemy knife tag, and click on the normal knife and select the knife tag. You could also just look at the names. I just like to work with tags better. Yes, so now we have set up our tags and we should be able to recognize these when we take some damage. And I think I also just noticed if I click on my enemy damage here, see that I forgot to remove everything here. So of course it also needs to have removed everything from any state into enemy damage. I just forgot to do it. Okay, so where should we begin? I think we should be able to damage the enemy first, and then later we can add the damage functionality for our player. So if we click on the knife prefab, you'll see that it doesn't have a collision box on it, but it will need a collision box so that we can collide with the enemy. So click on add component and write box, box, and add a collision. And the same goes for the enemy knife. Just click on it, add component, and take the box collider 2D as well. So now we have colliders on both weapons. So we will need to have a take damage function in our game, and basically we need to make it into a coroutine or an IEnumerator return because our player will need to use an IEnumerator, I think, so that he doesn't just die right away, but it takes a while before he dies. So let's go to our character And in here we'll need to create an abstract function, and an abstract function is something that it's basically the same as one of the functions inside an interface, but it's just contained in an abstract class, and this means that everyone that inherits from that abstract class will have to implement this function. So if I make a public void take damage, let's not call it void, let's actually make it an I enumerator, and it's not going to take any parameters. So I don't need to make any scope underneath it, because it's going to be abstract. So it's public abstract, because an abstract class can't contain any functionality, so we will not need to make a scope underneath it. So now it's an abstract class, and now it complains 2 places here, as you can see. So our enemy and our player needs to implement this function for this warning or this error to go away. So we click here, we can right click on the character and click quick actions, and then we can click implement abstract class, and we can do the same for our player. Right click on character, quick actions, okay, it's out there apparently, implement abstract class, and this will implement the take damage function in both of them. So this indicates that both of them need to have this take damage function no matter what. And we can also go to the enemy and remove that throw non-implemented exception here. And in the player we can just yield return null for now. Okay, because an I enumerator needs to return some seconds, I wait for seconds, so that it can take some time. For example, when the player dies, we will need to make him blink, or when he takes damage, we'll need to make him blink, flash on and off, and we'll use the I enumerator for that. That's why we are making it into an I enumerator here. So to be able to do some damage, we will need some health, and as far as I remember, we didn't make the health there yet, as you can see. So we need to go to our character and go all the way to the top, and here we need to make a new protected integer health, and let's just make this one serialized so that we can see it from the inspector and set it. So we need to have this health here. Besides health, we will also need to know if the player is dead or not. So we can make a public abstract, what should we call it, integer, bool, and we can call this one is dead. So this one needs to return if the player is dead or not, and we never need to set this one, so we can simply just make it into a get property, like so. Okay, so what I just did now was that I made it an abstract property called is dead, which means that every single character or every single script that inherits from this one will need to have their own implementation of its is dead, because the player needs to do something else than the enemy if he's dead. So I have done like this to make a abstract property. We could just implement a normal property in both of them, but I like better to just make sure that all of them has this. So if we go to the enemy, we can right click on character again and quick actions, and then implement the abstract class. You see there should be an isDead here, which throws a non-implemented exception. isDead is going to return true if the player is dead, and false if the player is alive or the enemy is alive. So to do this, we need to return health larger or equal to 0, or less or equal to 0 actually, because it needs to return true. And we need to go to the player as well, and we can right click quick actions and implement abstract class, and then we'll see we have this is dead here, and here we also need to say return health less or equal to 0. So this will make it return true if the health is less or equal to 0, which we are asking, is it dead? Yes, it is. If the health is larger than 0, then it returns false. So right now the player's is dead looks exactly the same as the enemy's is dead, but we will have to add one more thing later. So for now, let's just leave it like this. Okay, So let's go back to the enemies take damage. And the take damage function needs to make sure to reduce our health. So the first thing we have to do is to say health minus equal 10. So right now I've just decided that every single time you take damage in this game, you reduce it by 10. You can also make some variables or some calculations that will take damage based on, so that you can take damage based on these things. Okay, so if is dead. So if we are not dead, well, then we need to say my animator.set trigger damage, because then we need to take damage if we're not dead. Else, if we are dead, we need to say my animator.set trigger die, because then we're going to die and we need to play the die animation, and we need to say yield return null here, so that this I numerator is satisfied. Okay, so now we have a take damage function, but we are not calling it anywhere. We're not recognizing this function, or we're not using it for anything yet. So to use this, we will have to go to our character, and we will have to go to the an on trigger enter function. And didn't we make that? Nope, we didn't make the on trigger enter. Sorry, we didn't make the on trigger enter yet. So let's do that here in the bottom. Make public virtual void on trigger enter 2D, and call collider 2D other. And this take damage, I'm just going to move it to the top here after update. There we go. Yep. Okay, so if other.tag equals knife, then we say start coroutine take damage. So we have the take damage function here, and because our enemy has implemented the take damage function in here, we will run this functionality inside the enemy, even though we call the take damage from up in our character. And this is a very smart thing to do with these abstract functions, because we define it up here that it exists, so we call it up here, but because the enemy makes its own implementation, this code down here will be executed if it's an enemy, and if it was a player, it will call its own functionality, its own take damage as well. Now it's complaining here because it says on trigger enter is not overridable. It's now overridable, so we have to make public void override on trigger enter 2D. Public, sorry. Void on trigger enter 2D, there we go. And we also need to call base dot on trigger enter 2D and give it the other as a collider. So you can see now the code will jump in here when on trigger enter is called on the enemy, and then it will go to the character and check if it's a knife we get hit by. If it's a knife we got hit by, we're gonna start coroutine take damage, which runs the take damage function down here. So let's give it a try and see if it works. Let's try to jump up here. Oh, sorry. We will of course have to click on the enemy and find his health somewhere. Here, he has a health, and let's say that he has 20 health. So we need to hit him 2 times for him to die. Let's make 30, so it hits 3 times. When you have set up the health, we can try to play the game. And let's go up here, and he throws a knife. And yeah, okay, the knife has not set a trigger on it, so it just pushes me off the platform and this like very powerful weapon. But that's not what we want to do. So select your enemy knife and your normal knife, and remember to find the collider and set it as a trigger. It's a pretty cool effect. Again, sometimes you make some errors and it actually makes some nice functionality in your games, but this is not what we want. So if we jump up again, and nothing should happen here, and if we hit the player we should get something, or the enemy, but nothing happens right now. So let's see what the problem is. It might actually just be the fact that I forgot to save, so let's try to go back in here and save. and jump back into the game, and let's see if the enemy actually takes some damage right now. Jump up here and we throw a knife. He takes damage here and damage there, and then he dies. And then he keeps playing the death animation and follows me around here. We of course have to do so that he doesn't do the worm like this. Actually looks kind of cool, but yeah, we will need to make sure that the death animation doesn't loop like this, and we need to make sure that he can't follow you when he's dead. This is kind of creepy actually. So let's make sure that it doesn't loop first of all. If we go to animations and find the enemy and find the death animation, we'll have to remove the loop time here. So that's it. And then we'll have to play again. Let's see what happens if we try to attack him. He takes damage, and dies. And now he just follows me. He doesn't he doesn't do the worm anymore like he did before. So we'll have to make sure that he can't follow you as well. And we can do that by going to our script, finding the enemy script, and inside update, we simply have to make an if statement that says if is dead, and move everything in here and make an exclamation mark. So if he isn't dead, then we execute the current state at look at a target. If he's dead, then we won't look at our target and follow him and so on. So let's try to run the game again. So let's kill him. There we go. Die. And now he's dead on the ground instead of following me around. So now he's actually dead, but I don't know if you noticed it, but when I attack him and he takes damage, he actually slides on the ground because he's still able to move whenever he takes damage. So we need to prevent that as the last thing in this video. So we need to make sure that he doesn't move whenever we take damage. So we go to animation behaviors, and here we'll have to add a damage behavior to the target. So let's go to our, let's find our enemy damage here. If you click on the damage inside the, the animator, and click on the add behavior and write damage behavior, and click enter to add the new script. Then we can double click on the damage behavior and load it. And let's see, if we untag this one, uncomment it, then we'll need to make sure that we are indicating that we take damage. So in the character, we will need to add a taking damage property. So let's make a property and call it bool and call it taking damage. So now we can indicate if we are taking damage or not. And basically we just need to keep it like this because it should be get and set. So inside our damage behavior, we'll have to say animator dot get component character, because they're all characters. So this will also work for the player. Taking damage equals true. And yeah, let's wait with the player for now. If we go to the onState exit, then we will have to say animator. Actually, we can just copy this one up here and paste it down here and set it to false again. So that's basically what we need to do in the damage behavior. Now we have to use this taking damage somewhere. So let's go to our enemy. So we'll have to go back to our update function here, and inside the isDead we'll have to make an if statement that says if taking damage. So if we doesn't take damage, well, then we are able to execute. The reason that I leave look at target outside here is because even though the enemy is taking damage, he should be allowed to turn around 180 degrees to start attacking you if you jump over him, for example. So in this way we avoid a lot of complications. If you attack the enemy, jump over him and run away, then suddenly you're out of sight. So by leaving look at target outside the taking damage if statement, we will make sure that he turns around and looks at the player even though he takes damage. So let's have a look at this. Let's jump down, jump up, and let's see if we can attack the enemy. There we go. If he runs and he gets hit, then he stops running because it hurts, and then he dies. So now we can kill our enemy probably, and you can see there's something I'm landing on here, because I'm landing on apparently on his collider, so we'll also have to tag his collider somehow. Let's see, the layer should also be in the enemy layer. Yes, just change children. And let's see if we do like this now. I shouldn't land in the air like that. Damage, damage, damage. Let's see. Yeah, there we go. So now I'm not falling down weirdly because I jump on top of an enemy. Anyway, now we have an enemy that can die and take damage. In the next video we will have a look at how we can enable the sword on the player, so that we can also kill our enemy with the sword. Yeah, that's basically it for this video. Remember to follow me on Twitter, like my Facebook page, and subscribe to the channel. And also, if you really like my videos, then don't forget to support me by either going to the Patreon page and supporting me there, where you can get some perks, or you can simply just get this project or any of my other projects. Thank you again for watching.